The air inside the hegemony's obsidian negotiation chamber was cold. Not from temperature. No, that was carefully maintained to optimal crystalline resonance, but from the sheer weight of generational arrogance echoing off the walls. Across from the hegemony's luminous envoy, Kazare of the Vazpra, the galaxy's most renowned, most feared, and most expensively discreet assassin, sat in perfect stillness, his chameleonic skin shifting in subtle ripples of green and steel blue. Tentacles rested lightly on the table, not coiled, not tensed, observing, waiting. "I will repeat the request only once more," the hegemony's representative stated, their crystalline lattice pulsing with a hint of irritation. "Eliminate the human diplomatic delegation. The full fee will be transferred. Triple your standard rate." Kazare blinked. Slowly. That was not the response the crystalline being expected. "That proposal," Kazare said at last, his voice like distant rain on metal, demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of risk assessment. "I must respectfully decline." The hegemony's representative glowed in disbelief, color fading in shock. "They are merely Deathworlders. Dangerous, yes, but not beyond your capabilities." Kazare slowly stood to full height. He did not threaten. He educated. "Perhaps I should elaborate on why this contract is inadvisable." 2 cycles ago, Kazare had accepted what appeared to be a routine assignment. An Arxan trade minister. Photosynthetic. Predictable. Vulnerable to atmospheric adjustments. Child's play. "I had arranged everything precisely," Kazare continued. "Target patterns mapped. Ventilation systems primed. Atmospheric oxidation near detonation thresholds. The minister would not have survived 30 seconds. The representative glimmered with impatience. Kazare's tendrils rippled in what might have been mirth. Everything was perfect, except for the human. She was listed on the roster as a security consultant. Unarmed, average height, smiled a lot. Useless, Kazare had thought, until she'd walked into the room, looked straight at the corner where he lay perfectly cloaked in state-of-the-art stealth technology, and casually said, "That corner is exhibiting suspicious levels of emptiness." Kazare blinked in disbelief. She'd sensed him by absence, and then, before he could react, she had hurled a cup of steaming liquid directly into the void he occupied. "What was it?" the hegemony envoy asked, voice now uncertain. Kazare's eyes gleamed. "A caffeinated neurotoxin. Humans call it coffee." The chemical reaction was instant. Chameleonic protocols deactivated. Kazare's camouflage failed completely. He found himself fully visible to a roomful of sentients, and one grinning human. And that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was what she said next. "Finally, a chance to test my octopus wrestling seminar moves." Kazare tilted his head. She was excited. The envoy's crystalline resonance dimmed to a sullen blue. "You aborted because of one human." Kazare raised a finger. "Not aborted. Learned." They'd sparred for 5 minutes. He'd been disarmed twice. She'd offered him a seat. Then coffee. They talked for 6 hours about assassination techniques. She gave him notes. "I left with more tactical insights than I gained in a decade of guild seminars." Kazare paced slowly now, his voice smooth as silk drawn over razors. "Since that encounter, I've studied humans. Extensively. I even built a profile on their response patterns to assassination attempts." He tapped his wrist. A holographic chart bloomed between them. 27 attempted assassinations of human diplomats in the last standard cycle. 0 successful. And not only did every attempt fail, Kazare said, they treated each one as a training opportunity. They call it lessons learned. The crystalline envoy was now entirely dim. "And here's the most terrifying part," Kazare continued. They created a doctrine, paranoid optimization. They assume the universe is actively trying to kill them, and they treat every failed attack as a gift. He shifted the hologram again. More charts, more surveillance. Have you heard of Murphy's Law? No. They believe that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So they preempt it. And when someone does try to kill them, Kazare smiled grimly. They don't retaliate. They investigate. They dissect the conspiracy. They find every link in the chain. He pointed to the next screen. The Proxima incident. One human agricultural consultant. One failed hit. Result: collapse of a three-system criminal shadow economy. Official designation: follow the money. The envoy twitched. And you still refuse? Kazare's eyes narrowed. Humanity does not treat assassination as warfare. They treat it as the beginning of a conversation. And the second they identify the source, they respond. Militarily, Kazare shook his head. Economically, diplomatically, mimetically, they don't just destroy your plans. They turn them into cautionary training slides for every other species. He leaned forward, and the worst part, the envoy flinched. Kazare's voice dropped to a whisper. They make friends with your enemies. They weaponize being attacked. He ended the briefing with one final hollow recording. A human diplomat leading a classroom. Diplomatic immunity isn't just a privilege. It's a promise. If someone breaks that promise, we break everything else. A student raised their hand. What about assassins? Great question. First, we survive. Then we thank them. Then we improve. Then we find who hired them and make them regret it. Any more questions? The hologram faded. Kazare faced the envoy, bioluminescent patterns now in full warning bloom. I decline your contract. But, however, Kazare paused. I recommend honesty. Speak with the humans. Bring concerns, not blades. They respect transparency. And coffee. The envoy hesitated. Kazare offered one last truth. They have a saying, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. The envoy departed. Kazare's communicator chirped. Message from Sarah Chun. Hey, hegemony's sniffing around. Want backup? Got glowing coffee. It's weird, but it's good. Kazare smiled. Maybe terrifying, yes, but also interesting. And for an assassin used to endings, that was almost enough to start something new. 2 standard cycles had passed since Kazare, elite operative of the Vospra, had nearly been outmaneuvered by a smiling, caffeine-fueled human. He still wasn't over it. The humans weren't either. They'd added him to their mailing list. Kazare now found himself deep inside a human diplomatic outpost, voluntarily, a strange decision even to himself. The place smelled like ozone and optimism, which was to say, dangerously unstable. He paced into the operations lounge, bioluminescent skin flickering in neutral tones, and was instantly hit by the familiar scent of freshly brewed neurotoxin. Coffee, and a lot of it. Human agents moved briskly between sleek terminals, holographic boards filled with glowing charts, and something called snack rotation priority. Meanwhile, a large mug beside the console read, I survived another assassination attempt, and all I got was this mug. Kazare felt a tentacle twitch. Hey, tentacle guy. He turned just in time to be handed a steaming mug of brown liquid by a woman in black tactical gear. Welcome back, said Sarah Chun. Hope you brought your taste buds. This one glows in the dark. The mug had no label. Kazare stared at it like it might detonate. Why does it shimmer? He asked. Oh, that. Sarah shrugged. It's called solar brew, distilled from coffee beans grown on a photosynthetic yacht orbiting a pulsar. That's not normal. She grinned. Neither are we. Kazare sat, carefully, and observed the training session unfolding ahead of them. A dozen human security officers were reenacting an attempted assassination, not to prevent it, to analyze it, and in some cases improve it. They even gave scores. One guard yelled that ambush lacked emotional resonance, while another was docked points for uninspired knife work. Kazare whispered, "Why are your security teams grading assassination attempts?" Learning opportunity, Sarah replied. Also, we believe in feedback culture. After the simulation ended, Kazare was invited to lecture to assassins about assassination, on how not to assassinate humans. It was possibly the most paradoxical thing he'd ever done. "I was compromised," Kazare explained to the assembled operatives, "not by technology, not by firepower, but by instinct." He paused. "She sensed me because the room felt wrong." Her exact words were. Sarah piped up from the front row. "That corner's too quiet. It's suspiciously empty." Kazare pointed. "Yes, that." She threw boiling liquid into thin air, without visual confirmation. A hand went up in the back. Was it standard black coffee or espresso? Kazare blinked. "Espresso." The room murmured in professional awe. "High-pressure delivery," someone whispered. "Respect." Later, over a table surrounded by tactical gear and thermoses, Kazare flipped through something Sarah called the Paranoid Optimization Handbook. It was 800 pages long. Section titles included Planning for the Unplannable, Weaponizing Whimsy, Contingency Plans for Contingency Plans. "You actually trained to expect failure?" Kazare asked. Sarah nodded. "Failure is the default. Anything else is a bonus." He stared at a chart titled Probability Curve of Friendly Fire versus Improvised Genius. It was shaped like a smiley face. "You're not normal," Kazare muttered. "Nope," Sarah agreed. "You weaponized predictable unpredictability." "Also coffee," she added, sipping something that sizzled faintly. Kazare stared at her mug. "Is that steaming and glowing?" "Yeah, this one's caffeinated and quantum entangled. The taste collapses into different flavors based on your mood." "That's not how quantum mechanics works." "You keep saying that." Kazare pulled up his personal notes. Data, timelines, incident logs, all failures, all involving humans. Not one traditional assassination attempt had succeeded in 2 decades. Every failed hit had led to tighter security protocols, interspecies cooperation, and new government friendships. One failure had founded a diplomatic academy. Another had spawned a culinary diplomacy initiative. Another, Kazare still found this unbelievable, had inspired an entire species to switch sides. Sarah offered him a refill. He hesitated. "It's safe," she assured. "Mostly." Kazare sighed and took a sip. The flavor hit instantly. Spice, citrus, cosmic dread. And nostalgia? "I taste a failed op from 6 cycles ago," he whispered. "Side effect," Sarah said cheerfully. "Sometimes the coffee remembers you." That evening, Kazare returned to his quarters. He sat in silence, staring at the half-empty mug still faintly humming on his desk. His communicator chimed. Message from Sarah. "Security symposium next week. Want a co-host? Themes diplomatic contingencies and experimental pastries. Bring a tentacle-friendly apron." Kazare stared. The humans didn't need assassins. They recruited them, weaponized them, friend-zoned them with caffeine and war stories. And now he was one of them. He replied, "Fine, but I'm not baking." "Sarah, everyone bakes eventually. Resistance is adorable. See you Thursday." Kazare had learned a lot from humans. How to spot booby traps disguised as brunch buffets. How to make peace treaties out of pancake recipes. How to weaponize sarcasm. But nothing had prepared him for Murphy. Not the human, but the law. He first encountered it during a quiet moment in Earth's orbital diplomatic station, flipping through an introductory psychology manual Sarah had left on his desk titled, "So You've Been Almost Killed by a Human, a Survival Guide for Recovering Assassins." Chapter 2 was titled, "Murphy's Law, Why We Assume the Universe is Trying to Kill Us." Kazare read the opening line twice. If something can go wrong, it will. So we plan accordingly. And then, underneath in bold marker, someone had scrawled, "And if it doesn't go wrong, that's suspicious." Kazare didn't fully understand until he attended a human red team exercise. The premise was simple. Create a realistic assassination attempt scenario. Let security try to stop it. Learn from how everyone failed. Not if they failed. How? Sarah, of course, was leading the session. She stood beside a display labeled Operation. Something's probably already gone wrong. "Our motto is, fail faster," she explained. "We expect our defenses to collapse. That way, when they don't, we know we've missed something." One alien dignitary raised a trembling pseudopod. "But what if the attack succeeds?" "Oh, that's the backup simulation," Sarah replied cheerfully. "We treat every success as a failure to anticipate future sabotage." The simulation began. Assassins burst through vents. Decoys melted into the crowd. A food tray exploded into confetti and cheese. Half the security team turned out to be moles. A wall turned out to be sentient. And yet, the humans responded calmly, as if they expected all of it. One even took notes while being fake-stabbed. "Your training methodology is chaotic," Kazare observed, watching a group of interns hurl espresso shots at drones. "Not chaotic," Sarah said, flipping through her clipboard. "It's paranoia-based optimization." She held up a laminated flowchart titled, "If the plan is going according to plan, abort the plan." Kazare had studied hundreds of species. The Arxen strategized through telepathy. The hegemony trusted in data symmetry. The Vospra, his own kind, used pattern camouflage and predictive neural forecasting. Humans used improv. They had entire departments dedicated to preparing for the worst idea in the room. They called them scenario engineers. One such engineer, a man named Will, had once designed a failsafe that involved duct tape, a water balloon, a chocolate bar, and diplomatic immunity paperwork disguised as origami. When asked why, Will simply shrugged and said, "It worked in the dry run." That night, Kazare sat in his quarters and ran the numbers. 0 successful assassinations, 100+ failed attempts, countless procedural upgrades. He flipped to the next page in Sarah's guide. A sticky note was attached. "We don't fear Murphy. We invite him to the party. Then we show him why he should fear us." Smiling face with sunglasses. Sarah later explained over yet another cup of glowing coffee. "Murphy's Law isn't a warning. It's a blueprint. You prepare for failure. We train for it. We live in it. You should see our birthday parties." Kazare raised a brow ridge. "Your species celebrates aging by simulating disaster." "No," she said, "we simulate disaster while aging." Later that week, Kazare reviewed footage from past human diplomatic missions. One clip showed a junior agricultural attaché rolling under a laser grid to grab a briefcase full of kombucha diplomacy documents while fending off nanodrones with a baguette. Another showed an envoy redirecting an assassination beam by reflecting it off her polished travel mug into a hostile's shoe. Kazare blinked. That wasn't even intentional. "Sarah, we call that accidental excellence." Or Tuesdays. Kazare eventually asked the big question, "Why do you expect everything to go wrong?" Sarah didn't hesitate. "Because it has. Because it will. Because somewhere out there, someone's planning to destroy us with weaponized paperwork and mood-controlling soup." He stared. That was oddly specific. We stopped it last month. Soup's banned from trade deals now. Khazare sat with that for a long time. Most species feared chaos. Humans? They lived in it. They invited it over, named it, gave it a coffee mug and a benefits package. That night, he updated his professional assassin profile. Status retired, reclassified as specialist in applied unpredictability. And in the footnote, current specialty, anticipating the unanticipatable, alongside species that do it for breakfast. He finally understood. Humans weren't hard to kill because they were strong. They were hard to kill because they'd already imagined it, survived it in their heads, laughed about it, built a fail-safe, and then hid it inside a croissant. Murphy's Law wasn't a rule. It was a dare. There is no faster way to terrify the galaxy than by telling them that humans are now holding a seminar titled Lessons Learned, especially when the subtitle is How We Failed, Survived, and then weaponized the debrief. Khazare had been invited to observe Earth's Diplomatic Security After Action Review Conference, a name so benign, so bureaucratic that it barely disguised the truth. It was where humans evolved, not biologically, strategically. The event took place inside a rotating space station orbiting Titan, in a polished, multi-level chamber filled with humans wearing lanyards that read, "Ask me about my favorite disaster." Khazare was escorted to the guest lounge and offered a cup of calming quantum espresso by a security intern wearing body armor and bunny slippers. He accepted with caution, then took a seat next to a seat that spontaneously unfolded itself into a massage pod because Earth Tech was apparently drunk on ambition. The stage lights dimmed. The crowd hushed. A spotlight snapped to life. Sarah Chun took center stage, dual mug holsters strapped to her sides like caffeine-powered pistols. "Welcome, everyone," she said, smiling as if no one here had ever been shot at for a living. "Today's theme is, if you mess with us, you become homework." The first panel was titled, Surprise! You're an educational case study. A slideshow began. Each slide had 2 images, an attempted assassination, a new safety protocol. The audience murmured appreciatively. Khazare took notes. A lot of them. Slide 4. Arcturian explosive treaty scroll incident. Problem. Diplomats handed scroll rigged with fusion trigger. Solution. All diplomatic gifts now scanned by experimental AI powered by cats trained to detect malicious paper folding patterns. Slide 7. Ambassador. Hot tub electrocution attempt. Problem. Conductive spa malfunction. Solution. No more water-based diplomacy, said Sarah. Spa summits are now simulated in VR, with rubber ducks for morale. By the break, Khazare was stunned. Humans didn't just survive sabotage. They documented it, memed it, color-coded it, and then created 5 new defense systems from it. In the hallway, a poster read, "The difference between trauma and a TED Talk, a working mic, and good lighting." During the next session, a speaker from Earth's Department of Memetic Defense presented weaponized debriefing, turning failures into first contact protocols. They explained how one failed kidnapping attempt turned into a new style of diplomatic shuttle, a security partnership with the would-be kidnappers, a viral hashtag campaign called #SurviveToThrive. Then came the panel on Lessons Learned Database Access for Galactic Allies. Khazare's tendrils stiffened. "Wait," he asked, raising a hand. "You share your failures?" Sarah nodded. "Of course. What kind of terrible friend doesn't publish their trauma in detail? But wouldn't your enemies see it?" "They always do," she grinned. "That's the point." Khazare pulled her aside during the caffeine intermission. Yes, intermission, not break. They had a barista division. "You're telling me," he said, low and wary, "that your species actively catalogs assassination attempts so others can learn from them?" Sarah sipped her quad-shot nebula roast. Exactly. Every mistake, every attack, every chaotic disaster. It's all data. But that makes you harder to kill. Correct, she said, and makes others afraid to try. She smiled again. Now you're getting it. Kazare reviewed the database later that evening. It included a 12-step survival guide titled When Your Hoverlift Tries to Murder You, a comic book adaptation of the Proximate Embassy Soup Uprising, a training video called Surviving Sabotage with Jazz Hands. By midnight, Kazare updated his VOZ-PRA professional code. Never target species that turn trauma into PowerPoint. The final session was closed door. Only trusted allies allowed. Kazare was invited. They dimmed the lights. Sarah stepped forward. Today, she said, we'll be demonstrating reverse assassination theory. A pause. In other words, how to turn assassins into allies. She gestured toward Kazare. He's our case study. The room applauded. Kazare blinked, stunned. You use me in a lesson? Sarah beamed. You're not a lesson. You're a best practice. Afterward, they handed Kazare a mug. It read, I survived the Lessons Learned program, and all I got was tactical wisdom and chronic suspicion. He held it with something approaching reverence. Because humans didn't just survive. They documented. They iterated. They taught the universe how to never die the same way twice. Which meant that one way or another, humanity was always one failure ahead. The invitation was printed on synth paper laced with caffeine and embossed in edible chocolate ink. Kazare stared at it with all four eyes. It read, the first annual Interstellar Coffee Diplomacy Summit, because peace talks taste better with pressure-brewed beverages. Kazare had long since stopped being surprised by humans. But this was a whole new flavor of absurd. He arrived aboard the orbital platform Beamline 7, where the air smelled of roasted ambition and unstable science. The event was hosted by the newly minted Terran Office of Hospitality-Based Threat Deflection. He was greeted by a human diplomat in a shimmering apron reading, Ask me about my flavor profile. The central chamber resembled a cathedral designed by caffeinated engineers. Tables floated midair on anti-gravity pads. Holographic mugs spun slowly, annotated with quantum-tasting notes like berry overtones of strategic cooperation, smooth finish with notes of economic sanctions. Kazare was led to the alien preferences tasting pod, where a human barista handed him a cup and said, this blend aligns with your combat reflexes and emotional repression patterns. Enjoy. He didn't know what any of that meant, but it tasted like nostalgia and mild paranoia. He approved. Sarah Chun took the stage. Welcome, everyone. Today we celebrate the only universal constant stronger than entropy, coffee diplomacy. She tapped a remote. A hologram appeared overhead. Quantum brews and cultural truces, the Terran experience. We've discovered that most galactic disputes can be de-escalated with a shared beverage, especially if it's physically impossible to understand the flavor without solving a physics equation first. Kazare's translator unit buzzed as Sarah continued. Humans don't just drink coffee, she said. We study it. We infuse it. We weaponize it into moments of mutual understanding. She gestured to a timeline titled, The Evolution of Peace Through Percolation. First contact brew, mild sweet, low threat. Negotiation espresso, intense, emotionally clarifying. Post-conflict cold brew, served with sarcasm and second chances. Quantum Espresso X exists in multiple states until sipped. Results unpredictable. An ambassador from the Varelian Spore Union approached Kazare, cradling a mug that emitted faint harmonic vibrations. I no longer fear death, the ambassador whispered. I've tasted temporal roast. I have seen beyond. Cazare nodded solemnly. Same. The next panel discussion was titled Caffeinated Convergence: How We Tricked Three Warring Factions into Singing Kumbaya Over Hazelnut Drip. It featured a former assassin turned barista, a galactic trade envoy, and a diplomat known only as the Foam Whisperer. Their conclusion: shared sensory overload is the foundation of trust. Later, a minor trade dispute broke out over resource tariffs. Instead of escalating, the diplomats involved were escorted to a tactical espresso table. 2 rounds of high-gravity ristretto later, they emerged arm in arm, singing earth folk music and debating who made the better scones. Cazare was soon pulled aside by Sarah. "You look tense." "I'm surrounded by hyper-caffeinated diplomats attempting to manifest peace through drinks that literally shimmer when exposed to ultraviolet sarcasm." "So, Tuesday." She handed him a small glass vial. "Try this. It's a microdose." Cazare sniffed it. The scent made him recall a mission from 6 cycles ago, and regretted slightly. "What's it called?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Diplomatic immunitia." Later that night, Cazare stood at the observation deck, watching stars drift past while sipping something labeled Spiced Accord Vortex. He thought about his old job, about contracts, quiet kills, strategy in shadows. And now, he was a consultant for a team of humans who believed that peace was just aggressive hospitality plus caffeine. And the terrifying part, it was working. He checked his tablet. An update from the Galactic Assassins Guild. New policy update. All contracts involving humans must include a full barista certification or be considered suicidal by default. Cazare snorted softly. Humanity had done it again. They'd taken assassination attempts and turned them into tea parties with jazz and biscotti. Sarah appeared beside him, offering a mug. Almond milk diplomacy with notes of radical forgiveness. He took it, sipped, felt the flavor shift with his mood. "I can taste reconciliation." She grinned. "Side effect. It's emotionally adaptive." Cazare sipped again. "Also bitterness." "That's normal. It's diplomacy." It began, as so many pivotal shifts in galactic history do, with a muffin. Technically, it was a blueberry antimatter mood-reactive pastry, but the humans insisted on calling it a muffin, and it was delicious. Cazare had once trained to breach royal vaults underwater during an asteroid storm. Now, he stood in a sunlit demonstration kitchen aboard a mobile diplomacy lab named the Peace Oven, wearing an apron that read, "Ask me about my flavor-based conflict resolution strategy." On the counter before him were a tactical cappuccino foam generator, quantum oven calibrated to empathic resonance, and a laminated placard labeled Hospitality Doctrine, Phase 2. The subtitle: Turn Enemies into Brunch Guests. Sarah Chun adjusted her headset and addressed the crowd of diplomats, assassins, and mildly traumatized baristas. "Welcome to today's workshop, Strategic Kindness and the Biscuit Protocol." Cazare sighed, his chromatophores pulsing in a pattern known among his species as resigned professionalism in the face of absurd brilliance. The first exercise was titled Tactical Breakfast Nooks, Designing Spaces for Surprise Peace Talks. Sarah clicked her hollow remote. Rule number 1. Always have warm lighting, 2 types of coffee, and enough scones to de-escalate a border dispute. A Tharnak War General raised a claw. "What if we prefer hot chocolate?" "You're a prime candidate for marshmallow-based diplomacy," Sarah replied, nodding approvingly. Then came the pastry-based crisis simulation. Teams were handed folders with randomized galactic emergencies, then challenged to resolve them using only baked goods and hospitality tactics. Cazare's team was assigned unexpected assassination attempt during a diplomatic potluck. His solution: bake cookies with mild sedatives and emotional resonance triggers. Distribute with comforting eye contact. He won a gold whisk. Later, Sarah unveiled the next phase of the doctrine. Aggressive friendliness, psychological judo for the modern diplomat. The slide behind her read, "Kindness is disarming. Use it as a blade." She elaborated, "Greet aggressors with warm beverages. Complement their tactical positioning. Offer cookies that subtly influence neurochemical pathways toward trust." A hegemony envoy raised a crystalline limb. Isn't that emotional manipulation? Yes, Sarah smiled, but baked into something fluffy and delicious. As Kazare reviewed the day's briefing, he noted key updates in human diplomatic protocols. Defensive baking, 3 tiers, including anti-sabotage icing patterns. Mood-entangled pastries, treats that alter flavor based on emotional state. Quantum scones, exist in multiple textures until eaten. He tapped his communicator. Message to Guild Archive. Hospitality, now considered advanced threat mitigation. Recommend syllabus revision. The real turning point came during a live scenario demonstration. A simulated trade dispute had escalated. Raised voices. Tense posture. Kazare leaned forward to observe the standard escalation sequence. But instead of shouting or threats, the human delegate paused, reached under the table, and produced a tray. Cookies. Warm. Fragrant. Labeled, "Let's try talking instead." The alien dignitary accepted one cautiously, bit into it, paused. His posture shifted. "Is that nutmeg?" "Yes," the human said softly. "And cinnamon. Also mutual respect and shared economic benefits." Negotiations concluded in 12 minutes. Kazare updated his notes again. Recommendation: never confront a species that embeds ceasefire logic into baked goods. At the summit's closing, Sarah gathered the operatives for a group photo. Everyone held a coffee or pastry. The caption later read, "The faces of intergalactic peace, now serving with a smile." A few diplomats protested that it made them look too soft. They were overruled when the muffins were passed around. Unanimously, Kazare stood by the window, gazing out at the stars with his cup of almond accord roast. He had once been the galaxy's most feared killer. Now, he was a hospitality tactician, a security advisor, and apparently a pretty decent baker. He didn't hate it. Sarah joined him. "How do you feel?" "Like I just spent 6 hours being seduced by pastries." She sipped her drink. "You're adapting. Or assimilating. Same thing, but with better croissants." From across the room, the interstellar defense minister accidentally bit into a cookie designed to simulate empathy. He dropped his weaponized negotiation memo and said, "I think I understand love now." Kazare watched, then chuckled. "I give it 3 more cycles before the Galactic Charter is amended to include mandatory scone sessions." Sarah held up her mug. "To weaponized hospitality?" "To making peace taste like frosting," Kazare replied. They clinked mugs. The coffee shimmered in response. The interstellar broadcast began with soft music and a sparkling intro graphic. The Great Galactic Bake-Off, Diplomacy Edition, where treaties rise and tempers are kneaded into peace. Kazare blinked at the screen in disbelief. Sarah Chun leaned over and handed him a judge's clipboard shaped like a pastry. "You're on the panel. Try to look like someone who knows the difference between a truce tart and a ceasefire croissant." Kazare did not. The room was a culinary arena. Circular baking stations floated in anti-grav formation. Holographic countdown clocks shimmered above them. Participants included a Zenthari flame chef, known for baking at fusion core temperatures, a Proximan negotiation strategist turned cake sculptor, a human barista turned diplomat who specialized in cappuccino-based de-escalation, and somewhere in the corner, a sentient fungal hive mind in a chef's hat. The judges were seated beneath a glowing banner. Only one will rise, unless we all rise together. Cazare glanced at the judging rubric. Flavor complexity, tactical hospitality integration, mutual understanding aftertaste. He sighed and tightened his apron. This was somehow his life now. Round 1, bake your borders down. Each team was instructed to make a pastry symbolizing unity across hostile boundaries. The Zenthry entry, a molten lava soufflé containing microcapsules of peace proposals, readable only after digestion. The human team, a braided sweetbread representing mutual compromise, served with espresso shots that whispered inspirational quotes from past ceasefires when stirred. Cazare took a bite. It tasted like the end of a centuries-old war and a really good hug. Round 2, the Truce Tart Challenge. The Proximans presented a layered tart, each slice a different flag-colored custard, held together by a glaze called strategic syrup. The Fungal Hive, a bioreactive spore pastry that released calming pheromones when consumed in shared silence. One judge wept mid-bite. Sarah, sniffing a tart fragment, whispered, "Is this what forgiveness tastes like?" Cazare nodded solemnly, taking notes. Recommendation: deploy for post-conflict peacekeeping. Caution: may cause emotional flashbacks. The real drama came during the final challenge, mutually assured dessert. The prompt: bake something so emotionally disarming it could end a war. Everyone grew quiet. The tension thickened like custard under pressure. The human team unveiled their final creation, the memory macaron, infused with adaptive flavor nodes that adjusted to the eater's strongest peaceful memory, paired with a spoonful of empathy frosting and a side of regret-infused mocha foam. Cazare bit into one. He tasted a mission he hadn't wanted to take. He felt seen. When the fungal hive's turn came, they levitated a translucent pastry orb. One bite released a collective vision. Images of shared meals, hesitant apologies, soldiers lowering weapons, children laughing across species lines. The audience stood in reverent silence. Then someone began clapping, and it spread. Sarah stepped to the front. "The results are in," she announced, "and the winner is all of us, because today we proved that flavor is stronger than firepower." Everyone cheered. Even the lava soufflé applauded. Somehow, Cazare sat back in his judging pod, sipping a cinnamon-laced unity brew. He watched as delegates shared toasts over cocoa, diplomacy truffles, and peace éclairs. He reflected on his journey, from shadowy killer to consultant to hospitality tactician, and now bake-off judge. He wasn't even mad. Later, Sarah handed him a commemorative spatula. Engraved on the handle, "You can't spell diplomacy without pie." He sighed, then smiled. Across the galaxy, the bake-off was replayed on diplomatic channels. Negotiators began opening summits with shared bread. Treaty terms were now delivered with warm biscotti, and assassination attempts dropped 87%, not because of fear, because no one wanted to risk missing dessert. Cazare once thought he understood time. Linear, predictable, one moment leading into the next, like footfalls in sand. Then a diplomat handed him a croissant that allowed him to taste his grandmother's wedding vows. And now, he wasn't sure if he was experiencing the present or remembering the future. The Office of Strategic Culinary Advancement had announced its latest project, Operation Crumb Sight. If we can't predict the future, we'll bake it first. It started in Earth's deep orbit research station Yum 13, where human physicists and pastry chefs worked side by side. They had created quantum pastries. Not metaphorically quantum, actually quantum. Each bite collapsed a wave function, Each muffin revealed the most statistically optimal resolution to an interstellar dispute, provided you shared it with your adversary and chewed slowly. Kazare was invited to test the prototype, the Schrödinger scone. It came in a box labeled, "Do not observe until hungry." The taste changed depending on who he was thinking about. When he bit in, he was thinking about Sarah. It tasted like coffee, burnt sarcasm, and unexpected friendship. Sarah greeted him later that day, wearing her tactical breakfast apron. It was armored. "You ready?" she asked. "For what?" "We're building the Nook." Tactical breakfast nooks were a relatively new innovation in human diplomacy. Each nook came standard with mood-calibrated lighting, acoustic softening walls for passive de-escalation, a hot plate for emotionally warm cinnamon rolls, and, of course, quantum tablecloths. Yes, tablecloths. They adjusted their color and material density based on the emotional charge in the conversation. No one knew how, not even the engineers. They were afraid to ask. Sarah gestured toward the first prototype. "This one's called the compromiser. You sit down angry, you stand up full." Kazare blinked. "It smells like closure. Cinnamon and orange zest," Sarah said proudly. "We weaponized healing." As part of training, Kazare joined the breakfast diplomacy simulations. The scenario: two enemy species were locked in a bitter standoff over territorial lines drawn through a nebula. Solution: invite both sides into the compromiser, serve them superposition pancakes, which flipped flavor mid-chew, and hand them coffee brewed with empathy resonance beans. Result: not only was the dispute resolved, but both species formed a joint bakery venture. It was now the most successful chain in 3 systems. Kazare updated his log. Note: recommend reassessment of hostility thresholds in environments containing tactical tableware and passive-aggressive scones. The more he learned, the more Kazare marveled at the audacity of it all. Humans didn't defeat conflict with brute force. They absorbed it, baked it into lessons, and served it back with a smile. They had declared psychological warfare on pessimism, and they were winning. During a late-night strategy meeting over hyperfocus, espresso mochas, Sarah leaned back in her chair. "We're not trying to change the galaxy," she said. Kazare raised a brow. "You're not." She grinned. "We're just trying to make it sit down long enough to enjoy breakfast." And somehow that was working. The hegemony had installed breakfast nooks in their warships. The Varelian ambassadors now required croissants before any planetary negotiations. Even the Proximate Empire, which once banned beverages during conflict, had adopted a tea-infused truce protocol. One morning, Kazare sat alone at the compromiser, sipping a dark roast infused with mild optimism. He stared out at the stars and thought, "This is what peace tastes like." Sarah walked in, holding a muffin. "This one lets you relive your proudest moment," she said, tossing it to him. He caught it, took a bite. He was back in the bake-off, watching an interstellar warlord cry because of a tart. He smiled. Not bad. Then Sarah handed him a new folder. "Next project." He opened it. The title read, "Weaponized Tea Time, Tactical Tranquility Through Scones and Sass." He sighed. "Do I get to name the next muffin?" "Only if it changes reality when baked." "Deal." Kazare no longer questioned how humans worked. He just tried to keep up. Because in a galaxy full of enemies, the most terrifying advantage wasn't firepower. It was hospitality that knew what you needed before you did, and served it with perfect plating. "Too many muffins," First Speaker Exthal muttered, staring into his plate. It wasn't the quantity, it was the philosophy. He sat inside the Harmonizer, Earth's mobile diplomatic vessel that also doubled as an aggressive pop-up cafe. Across from him, a human ambassador was explaining, cheerfully, "We don't disarm you. We invite you to brunch, and make it really hard to stay mad. Exthal picked at his peach accord tart. It tasted like childhood forgiveness and mild compliance. He hated how effective it was. Elsewhere aboard the vessel, Sarah Chun addressed a mixed crowd of diplomats, former assassins, and two very confused mercenary admirals. "Welcome to today's keynote," she announced. Topic: friendliness as a strategic threat vector. Behind her, a slide read, "Polite persistence protocols. Smile until they surrender." Cazare watched from the side, arms crossed, sipping an aggressively mellow espresso. "She's doing the thing again," he whispered to a Zenthari envoy. "What thing?" "Disarming everyone by describing empathy in PowerPoint form." Sarah clicked to the next slide. Case study: the Proxima incident, an assassination attempt, a failed poisoned teapot, followed by a retaliatory tea ceremony with emotionally harmonized scones. Result: 1 trade alliance, 2 marriage proposals, and a commemorative recipe book. Next slide: the Arcturian Ceasefire Summit. Why compliment sandwiches work better with real sandwiches. Cazare could only nod. He'd been there. Nothing diffuses a millennia-old grudge like a perfectly grilled cheese and a shared existential crisis over dessert. Sarah leaned forward on the podium. "We're not pacifists," she said. "We're assertively kind. We weaponize vulnerability, scale courtesy, and deploy charm offensively." A murmur passed through the room. One hegemony general whispered, Are they flirting with peace?" Another nodded, trembling. "And we're falling for it." Back in the hospitality hub, alien diplomats debated tactics over plates of empathy-glazed danishes. One war strategist complained, "I came here to negotiate borders. Now I just want to open a joint bakery." His rival, chewing thoughtfully, replied, "I'm thinking of franchising emotional croissants." Cazare made a note. "Observe, peace spreading via baked-in ambition. Monitor sugar levels." By midday, the official galactic negotiations had devolved into an impromptu workshop titled "Turning Assassins into Ambassadors," a 5-ingredient strategy. Step 1, feed them. Step 2, listen. Step 3, offer them jobs. Step 4, offer coffee. Step 5, don't stop smiling. Sarah found Cazare reviewing new alliance proposals between 3 former enemy states. "Progress?" she asked. "They're trying to ratify a treaty over cupcakes." "Good. That means they're ready for phase 2. He narrowed his eyes. "Which is?" "Aggressively friendly conflict simulation brunch." He stared. "That sounds like a contradiction." "Exactly. Welcome to human diplomacy." The highlight of the summit was a surprise event. The hospitality gauntlet. Delegates had to endure 6 different regional coffees, 3 emotionally destabilizing desserts, and a flash mob performance of "Why Can't We Be Friends?" sung by baristas in armor. Cazare survived. Barely. In the final debrief, Sarah addressed the room. "We've learned something," she said. "Kindness isn't weakness. It's unpredictable, disarming, contagious." She paused, letting it sink in. "It's harder to hate someone who made you laugh over a pastry." Silence, then applause, followed by espresso, then group therapy over biscotti. Later, Cazare sat with Sarah beneath the observation dome. "Do you think it's working?" he asked. Sarah looked out at the stars. "Well, the hegemony just declared us a non-traditional security threat and opened 10 new embassies." She sipped her latte. "I'd call that a win." Cazare took a bite of something called a peace muffin. He immediately remembered a time he let someone live, and how it felt, right? He set down his fork. "Don't take this the wrong way," he said, "but you people are terrifying." Sarah smiled. "We know." There was a moment, just after the laughter, just before the tears, when the galaxy held its breath, not out of fear, but from the kind of reverent awe normally reserved for black holes and birth. The Galactic Council of Unified Intent, Experimental Branch, had convened for the first time aboard the floating diplomatic hub Serenity Cup 1. The chamber hovered in low orbit over a pale blue gas giant, basked in planetary light that shimmered like soft starlight on snow. Around the chamber, representatives of over 50 species reclined at gravity-neutral tea tables, sipping glowing infusions and biting into pastries that defied the standard model of physics. They weren't here to fight. They were here to feel. Sarah Chin raised her cup, an iridescent teacup labeled unclassified mostly. Her voice rang clear and gentle. To everyone here today, you were once someone's adversary. Now, you are someone's brunch date. That's evolution. Scattered chuckles and a few sniffles. Beside her, Kaz-Ra, formerly the galaxy's most precise assassin, now the unofficial mascot of reluctant reconciliation, watched silently. There was a subtle curl at the edge of his mouth. His kind didn't smile, but this came close. The menu for the summit was handwritten in 13 languages. Its headline: "This is not a treaty. This is a toast." Items included: quantum compromise crepes, collapsed into trust mid-bite, diplomatic immunitia, adaptive flavor, calming aftertaste, superposition cookies, reflected your current diplomatic alignment through frosting swirls. And for dessert, the entanglement truffle, a single bite capable of synchronizing negotiation empathy between two formerly hostile species. Sarah clicked her remote, projecting a final slide across the shimmering air. We didn't defeat our enemies. We seduced them into helping us win. Gasps, then applause, then polite spoon sharing. During the open mic portion, a Krovax admiral approached the podium and muttered, "I once tried to assassinate a human ambassador." Pause. "They invited me to brunch. I've never been the same." Another delegate, a diplomat from the Thorn caste Fungals, stood next. "I was prepared to die in battle. Now I run a galactic biscuit franchise." Tears, applause, jam. And then it happened. An unplanned moment. The lighting dimmed, not by design, but because a spontaneous alignment of moons triggered ambient resonance interference. The effect: everyone's pastries began to glow in harmony. No one panicked. They toasted. Later that night, Kaz-Ra and Sarah stood beneath a transparent dome, looking down on the gas giant swirling below. "She cried," he said, gesturing toward the former hegemony warlord who'd just hugged a sentient cloud made of bees. Sarah sipped her tea. People cry at progress. And muffins. She didn't cry when her world exploded. She didn't have cinnamon-infused closure back then. Kaz-Ra held up one of the final superposition cookies. It shimmered with unknown outcomes. Sarah raised her brow. "What flavor are you hoping for?" He bit it. Paused. "Tastes like maybe we make it." She smiled. "Good. That's what I put in the recipe." A soft chime echoed. A new message had been sent across the galaxy. Subject line: "The Muffin Accord has been ratified." And with that, centuries of conflict slowly began to unravel into conversation. Somewhere, a warship powered down its weapons and activated its espresso machine. A mercenary guild swapped bounty listings for biscuit tips. And one curious civilization sent a message to Earth: "Dear humans, we surrender, but only if you share the blueberry recipe." And back on Serenity Cup 1, Kaz-Ra quietly updated his personal records. Final entry: status: transcended traditional profession. If peace must be baked, so be it. I have the apron. He paused, then added one more line: "Humans scare me, but they've made me feel more alive than war ever did." He closed the file, looked out at the stars, and for the first time in his life, he believed in breakfast,